Today we're going to be taking a look at the Panasonic S1ii. This has become a very hyped camera in the YouTube camera scene. So a few things I just want to get out of the way before we jump in here. This is not going to be a full review. I only had a little bit of time with this camera, so it's really going to be more of a first impression, but I wanted to give you guys a sense for my experience with it and if it lives up to all of this hype that it's been getting. I will say though, up front here, that overall I still do think that the Nikon Z6iii is the better camera and really the best hybrid mirrorless camera out there. I did make an in-depth review which I will link to for that camera. And mainly that has to do with the really robust internal RAW features in all frame rates and resolutions. It's got that really great partially stacked sensor, so there's solid rolling shutter control. It's got really solid photo features, and a lot of these things actually are available in the S1ii as well, but for me personally, because I mainly shoot in RAW, the super versatile internal RAW options of the Z6iii just make it overall more functional in basically every situation. It's my go-to camera. But now when it comes to anamorphic shooting, that's really where the S1ii excels, and that'll be the focus of most of this video. But before we jump into that, let me just talk about some of the things that I like about this camera and some of the things that I don't like so much. Design of this camera is super nice, very ergonomic, great grip. There's just like a million buttons and things that you can program to your heart's content. I love that you can have literally any feature, and there are a lot of features in this camera, right at your fingertips, whether that's through a button or a quick menu or a touchscreen operation. In addition to that, we have this amazing articulating screen that this thing is just wild, guys. Like all the ways that it can bend, you can get some crazy shots and crazy angles with it, and like always know where your shot is gonna be, and it's gonna allow you to shoot in more difficult situations. You might not need like secondary monitors or remote shooting capabilities because you have so much control over that screen articulation. The camera has a ton of stabilization options. I'm really happy to say that it does feature in-body image stabilization even when shooting RAW. In addition to that, it's got electronic stabilization options which do crop in a bit on the image, as well as a really interesting cropless electronic stabilization. I don't think I've ever seen this before in other cameras, but it only works with certain Panasonic lenses, so I didn't get to test that out. There's also this really unique dynamic range boost mode. Again, I didn't get to spend too much time with this, but as far as I can tell, it expands the dynamic range of the camera's sensor with a hit to the frame rate. So when you have dynamic range boost on, you can only shoot at up to 30 frames per second. So 60 frames per second, 120 frames per second, you're not going to get access to any of those modes. But it seems like you'll get some more dynamic range to work with in the shadows and in the highlights. And also what's nice, if you shoot in Blackmagic RAW, you do get this nice handy highlight recovery feature, which can help control really bright highlights. And now we'll get more into this in just a bit, but the anamorphic options are just awesome here. You've got open gate shooting, which has been featured prominently in most of Panasonic's recent cameras, which allows you to use the full 3x2 sensor. and that is great when you're shooting with 1.5 to 1.6 times anamorphic lenses, because it'll give you a final D-squeeze ratio of around 2.2 to 2.4 to 1. But then there's also a full frame 4x3 mode that records in 4.8K, and you can record up to 60 frames per second in this mode. So it uses a bit of a crop on the sensor. It crops in mostly on the left and right sides and just a bit on the top and bottom, but 4x3 is great for 1.8 times and 2 times anamorphic lenses, which will give you a final aspect ratio of 2.4 or 2.66 to 1. Okay, so things that I am not a huge fan of with this camera, the internal RAW options are pretty limited. You can shoot ProRes RAW as well as ProRes HQ, ProRes LT, and 422 in a pretty good variety of resolutions and frame rates, but in terms of the ProRes RAW, it's really limited. You don't get any of the OpenGate 3x2 or the 4.8K 4x3 mode. And this camera does have a really interesting 5K OpenGate mode, where it actually takes the full OpenGate sensor, 6K sensor, and scales it down to 5K, but still uses that full frame. And you can then record up to 60 frames per second. But you can only record that using H.264 or H.265 compressed formats. Like, you can't shoot that in ProRes or ProRes RAW or even external RAW. So that is unfortunate. And then the 4.8K 4x3 mode, you can shoot up to 60 frames per second there, but again, only in the compressed H.264 or H.265 modes, as well as external RAW.
One thing that was also pretty strange, I was having a lot of issues with the autofocus, but that may have been the lenses that I was using. This here is the Sigma 65mm f2 lens. It's a bit of an older lens. This one was really struggling. But then when I switch over to the newer Sigma 17 to 28 millimeter, right here at 28 millimeters, there were no issues with the autofocus. I did find that it performed a bit better in 60 frames per second versus 30 or 24, but just something to be aware of, guys.
Now let's get a little bit more in depth into these anamorphic features. So really, this camera excels recording external RAW for anamorphic. I'm recording in external Blackmagic RAW with the Blackmagic Video Assist, and this gives you access to the full 6K OpenGate mode up to 30 frames per second in Blackmagic RAW, and the 4.8K full frame 4x3 mode up to 60 frames per second in Blackmagic RAW. You actually get anamorphic D-squeeze in camera, which is a feature that's unfortunately not available in a lot of cameras out there. So you can D-squeeze in basically all ratios except 1.6 times, I believe, but just use 1.5 times, it's close enough. And on top of that, you've also got anamorphic in-body image stabilization, which is a first as far as I'm concerned. And you can adjust that based on the squeeze factor of the lens. So you can do 1.33, 1.5, 1.8, 2 times anamorphic in-body image stabilization. Pretty wild. And I found that as long as you're not moving the camera around too much, the anamorphic stabilization is really good. All of these shots that you guys are seeing were just done handheld, no gimbal. I didn't even do any post-stabilization. Is it the best camera out there for anamorphic? Well, I think that's going to depend on your use cases. Again, how are you shooting anamorphic? Are the lenses really large or really small? How are you balancing them? If you need to use a gimbal, this camera is going to be better for that because of the lightweight and compact size. But if you need a more robust, fully riggable camera that can work with larger anamorphic lenses, then you might want to consider something like the Blackmagic Pixis or Ursa cameras, which are still relatively affordable but give you great anamorphic shooting capabilities. Now, I'm really looking forward to Blackmagic's upcoming Pixis 12K. I want to see how well that shoots and handles anamorphic video, because I am a huge fan of the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K, but with the new Pixis 12K sensor, I just can't wait to get my hands on that sensor, check out the additional dynamic range that it affords, and all of the crazy frame rate options. So I'm going to hold out final judgment on whether or not the S1ii is a better overall camera than the Pixis until I get to work with that. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this quick little first impression of the S1ii. If you enjoyed this video, click that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. I really appreciate your support. I'll see you in the next one.